Friends, it's time we quit being so defensive. It's time we get on the spiritual offensive. I'll tell you how today.
It's time for The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Michael Brown is the director of the Coalition of Conscience and president of Fire School of Ministry. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. That's 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
You are going to get today realistic encouragement. Realistic encouragement. Truth-based encouragement. Scripture-based encouragement. But we will be realistic. Welcome to The Line of Fire. This is Michael Brown. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to open the phone lines for anything you want to ask me about, like I do on Friday. And I will try to get to some questions, even if they're random. 866-34-TRUTH. 866-348-7884. Anything you've been wanting to ask me, maybe you're unable to get to on a Friday or another day. But I want to put out a question for you and give you the opportunity to respond. Namely this: what must we do to take the spiritual offensive in turning the tide in America today? Not just being on the defensive, not just trying to respond to the latest event of the culture wars, but what must we do to take the offensive? What are the most effective spiritual things we could do to turn the tide in America? That's my question for you. 866-34-TRUTH. Let me start off with a word of realism for you. Now, it may shock you. If you've listened to me for years, if you've read me for years, watched me for years, this may shock you, but it is encouraging. Now, hear me out. We will never win the culture wars. You get that? We will never win the culture wars. Until Jesus returns and establishes his kingdom on the earth, we will never win the culture wars. It is going to be like bailing water out of a boat. Now, the boat won't sink, okay? And sometimes we'll be busier bailing than others. But as long as we're in this world, we're going to be swimming against the tide and going against the grain. The world remains a fallen world. So even if we win a victory here, there's going to be another issue here. Let's say that we're able to turn the tide with abortion on demand in America. Okay? Now we're still going to have a host of other problems. What about all the problems with opioids and drug addiction? What about the problem with violence in our society? What about rampant sexual immorality? What about redefinition of marriage? What about the attack on gender? What about drunk driving? What about human trafficking? There's always going to be something that we're dealing with. William Wilberforce succeeded in accomplishing one of his two goals, which was, to eradicate slavery and the slave trade from Great Britain. He succeeded in doing that, a momentous task, the task of his life, but he succeeded by God's grace in accomplishing that goal. He had a second goal, the reformation of morals in the country. Now, the Wesleyan revival, the Methodist revival, Wesley, Whitefield, and others, had a tremendous impact in England. And England at the beginning of the 1700s looked very different, much worse morally, than England at the end of the 1700s. And you could go through one example after another about the profound change that came about. And yet, what Wilberforce wanted to see, he did not see as he wanted to in terms of his second goal. We, in every generation, friends, are going to be salt and light. In every generation, we are going to function as a moral conscience and a moral preservative, and as agents of positive change. But just like we give to the poor, and we help the needy, and we try to establish programs in which they can help themselves for the future, Jesus said, you're always going to have the poor with you. All right. So these are realities. They don't discourage me because, and it's just like in a sports event. All right. You're going to have give and take. You're going to have ebb and flow. The goal is, let's say you're playing over a season, 162 game season in baseball. Your ultimate goal is to win the World Series, but along the way, you lose many games. Along the way, you lose many innings. Along the way, you have disappointment and you have victory. It's going to be the same with us in this world. So just understand that. There's always going to be a battle. There's always going to be something else coming up. Now, I'm getting to my main point, which is how we can turn the tide spiritually and the most important things we can do. All I'm saying is we're always going to be engaged in the culture wars, and we must be. It's part of our role. If we don't get engaged, the bottom will fall out. If we don't function as salt and light, we'll have utter chaos in the society. Here, look. The latest example of cultural craziness is that the Boston Marathon, along with other marathons, have now announced that a man who identifies as a woman can compete as a woman. Now, Boston Marathon, everybody's running together. It's not like in say the Olympic Games where the men are competing here, the women are competing here. They don't run together, they don't lift together, they don't jump together, they don't compete together. All right? So men are competing, women are competing. But here in a marathon, everybody's running together. What's the difference? Well, the difference is that there are winners among the men and winners among the women. So, for example, the woman who won the Boston Marathon last year, amazing time for a woman, but it didn't qualify. She would not have been within the top 20 men. And the top man and the top woman get the same payday, I believe $150,000 for winning the Boston Marathon. You talk about something arduous. You talk about something taking years of training and discipline. I can't believe what the elite athletes have to fight through to run what they run and to overcome the mental and emotional and physical trauma of the race. But the prize money for men, for women, the same. They're both doing their very best, and the top athlete wins in each category. Well, let's say you're, as a man, came in number 18, but you sincerely identify as a woman. Well, you could now win the women's prize. But what about the ladies? What about all the women and all the years they sacrifice and the honor for their country? Or maybe they desperately need that money to go on and further a program in their nation, whatever it is. It is just absolutely unfair to the women. It was just discovered that in Iran, there are 8 men on the women's soccer team. These are men who have not had sex change surgery. They are biological males. Now, ironically, sadly in Iran, there's a death penalty for homosexual acts, but there are Muslim leaders who push gays to then have sex change surgery. So even if a guy identifies as a guy but is attracted to men, right? Well, no, go ahead, become a woman, have sex change surgery, and then as a woman, you can be with a man. So it's another cruel way to deal with those who are same-sex attracted. So, well, I don't identify as the opposite sex. But either way, whatever the case with these men, because they're required to wear long pants and long sleeves and a hijab, it's easier for a man to masquerade as a woman in that setting. Well, it's unfair. It's unfair to the other women. Of course it is. This is the latest example of cultural madness, and yes, we should push back against it. Absolutely. So I did. My latest article, I addressed that when a man wins the Boston Marathon as a woman or sets a record as a woman. I addressed the latest example of cultural madness. So with all compassion towards those who struggle with gender identity confusion, we still say that this is cultural madness to allow a biological chromosomal male to run as a female or compete as a female. It's unfair to the women. It's not about making this man feel better. It's about being fair to the other women, the other competitors. Okay, that's simple. That's simple. So we stand up and we push back. I heard from a legislator friend, I don't want to mention what state in particular, but he's a local rep. He's not a national rep. He's a local rep. And in his state, he distributed many, many copies of my book, Outlasting the Gay Revolution. We sent him copies. Some friends paid for them to be sent. And it was several scores of books he gave out to representatives and senators in his state. And he said that the book had an impact. Hearts were turned. He heard from people that was a game changer from them. And then he said that certain legislation, radical activist LGBT legislation, didn't even make it out of committee to get voted on. And he said your book played a large role, and that's his perspective. And then he went to different churches just on his own. Now, he has a regular job, plus he serves the state. He went to different churches, and he met with the pastors, and he asked the people to call in. He asked the pastors to have their people call their local legislators and tell them how they felt about a particular bill that was an unfair bill, an unrighteous bill that in many ways would be anti-Christian. And people called in. Well, anyhow, the thing never made it out of committee. So that's great that he's doing that. That's important. And he loves the Lord. He loves people. He's not a malicious, hateful guy, very nice guy. But he's seeking to be a witness, and he's unashamed of Jesus. And he's seeking to honor the Lord. He's seeking to do what's right and push back against this radical legislation. That's good. That's positive. That's necessary. I do the same in various ways as a voice raised up by the Lord. That's part of what I do. We each have our role to play in this. But that means we're always on the defensive. That means we're always reacting against something. That means we're always pushing back against something. So for me, the key thing is, while we do that, while we stand as salt and light, while we push back against unrighteousness and unethical things in the society and cultural madness, we must bring about positive change. We must bring about positive change. I asked this question on Twitter. I said, what's the single most important thing we can do to turn the spiritual tide in America? And I gave 3 choices: 1, corporate prayer; 2, evangelism; 3, strengthening our homes; and then 4, other. Please specify. And I'll tell you how people voted in a little while. Folks have been coming in with other comments, weighing in, which I appreciate that. But my point is, we have been given the sword of the Spirit. That doesn't hurt people. It saves people. And I want to give you some encouragement today that if we will give ourselves to the gospel, if we will give ourselves to the Great Commission, if we will give ourselves to being agents of change through the gospel, while we stand, while we do all the other things, we can actually turn the tide. We're always going to be fighting culture wars, and there are always going to be lost people to save until Jesus comes. But if we really want to make a positive difference in a country, ultimately, we must put first and foremost the Great Commission. We'll be back. We're going to take some calls. I've got some encouraging quotes to share with you today on The Line of Fire.
Shake the nation, change the world. Change the world.
You know, we've heard for years now, love is love. Love wins. And I have the right to marry the one I love. And maybe you know a gay couple, maybe family members or friends, and they really seem to love each other. Maybe they're raising kids. They love their kids. They're devoted to each other just like a heterosexual couple. You say, surely love should just accept that and embrace that. And many, even professing gay Christians, would point to Romans chapter 13, verse 10. Romans chapter 13, verse 10. And that tells us that love does no harm to its neighbor. Love is the fulfillment of the law. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. So if I know that telling my neighbor that homosexual practice is sin is going to hurt them, aren't I harming them? If God is love, won't he affirm a loving relationship? All right, let me make this clear. The reason that Scripture opposes homosexual practice and homosexual relations is because God is love. And because God is love, he wants what is best for us. And he didn't make a man to be with a man or a woman to be with a woman. They may be loving, they may be kind, they may be devoted to each other, but God did not make men for men or women for women. God has something better. The first thing is for people to truly know him as Savior and find forgiveness of sins, whatever those sins might be. The second is to find wholeness and completeness in him. I know folks who used to be practicing homosexuals who are now happily married heterosexuals. I know others that used to be practicing homosexuals that are now celibate. They haven't seen a change in their desires, but they love the Lord and they've crucified the flesh and they're fulfilled as single believers. This much I know. If I affirm homosexual practice, if I tell that couple, God bless you, I want to affirm you as a follower of Jesus, I am not helping them, I'm hurting them. The relationship is wrong in God's sight. The relationship is not the best that God has for them. And ultimately, if they come to understand that God is against it, now they're living in open...
Again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Friends, if you listened to yesterday's broadcast, you know that I interviewed Pastor Andre Vainal from South Africa about some tremendously disturbing news from there. We now have this up as a video by itself on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, Ask Dr. Brown. So do check that out. Some folks from South Africa who were watching the video were really pleased that we've addressed this, but one said this: it's to be applauded that Dr. Brown is tackling this issue, but he is misinformed on several fronts regarding the history of South Africa and therefore the morality of the situation now. So I thank folks for comments. I was sharing what we understood as the popular narrative here in the States and asking my guests to correct that where it was erroneous. But I appreciate folks from South Africa weighing in. So by all means, you can check out their comments as well for a fuller story. Let me share with you some quotes from evangelist Reinhard Bonnke, who has seen amazing fruit. He's in his 70s now, has seen amazing fruit in Africa, perhaps has seen more people professing faith in Jesus after his meetings there than any evangelist has in history. I mean, an extraordinary, extraordinary harvest continued by Daniel Kalenda, who is one of the grads from our ministry school. So the same gospel bearing the same fruit. And of course, a host of local leaders and a host of evangelists and others all over Africa preaching the gospel, and those that literally gave their blood in decades and centuries past for that continent. But listen to what Reinhard Bonnke says. When he speaks of revival coming to America, he says this: when I speak of revival, I am speaking of a mighty awakening, a tidal wave of salvations sweeping across the United States from stadium to stadium, city to city, coast to coast. Now, do I know that that will happen? Can I guarantee it? No. Do I believe it? Do I expect it? Yes. Now, let me tell you what I do know. I do know that Jesus said in Matthew 24, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. I know that. I know Matthew 28, Jesus told us to go into all the world and make disciples, and that he's with us always to the end of the age, all right? And that all authority in heaven and earth is given to him. I know that. I know in Acts 1, the Great Commission is to start to be filled with the Spirit, and then empowered by the Spirit to witness in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. I know that in Acts 2, that the Holy Spirit is being poured out on all flesh until the end of this age, the last days. And whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. I know from Romans 11:25 that the fullness of the Gentiles will come in, after which, / as a result of which, all Israel will be saved, the national turning of Israel. I know that. I know that our God is a God of victory and triumph, and that in him we overcome. I also know there'll be deception until the end of the age. I also know there'll be apostasy until the end of the age. Jesus warned about that as well in Matthew 24. I also know that people will be resisting until the end of the age. Yet, as I look at the days approaching, whether it's a year from now or 10 years or 100 years, leading up to the return of Jesus, the fact is we can anticipate great things from God. Great things from God. What we must do is give ourselves to prayer, not to survive, but for prayer for God to move and pour out his Spirit and shake America. Pray the Lord's Prayer for America, whatever country you live in, all right? For the whole world, but wherever you live. We must believe that the gospel is unstoppable. Didn't Jesus say that he's going to build his congregation, meaning Jew and Gentile, full of the Spirit, together in him? He's going to build his congregation, build his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, which either means gates signifying the powers of darkness working against the people of God, or gates of hell, meaning the defensive structure of the enemy, and the church marches through that. Either way, we are a victorious, overcoming, conquering people of God, not taking people over, not ruling the world, not subduing people by our efforts, but setting captives free through the gospel. Where the light of God shines, where the gospel advances, lives are transformed. Let me share another faith-building quote with you from Reinhard Bonnke. Bonnke said this: if God met our expectations, he would not exceed our imaginations. Let me read that again. If God met our expectations, he would not exceed our imaginations. On the one hand, we want to be realists. We don't want to have our head in the clouds in an unrealistic way. You don't want to write a check to help a ministry if you don't have the money in the bank, right? You want to be a realist. You want to have your feet planted on the ground. At the same time, we are believers. Isn't it unbelievable to the natural mind that a crucified Jew living in obscurity, I mean, dying in obscurity, you could say, but otherwise, even though well known in his area, just living within a few miles his entire life and working miracles there, drawing crowds there, but otherwise unknown to the rest of the world, dying, all right, and then has a ragtag bunch of disciples following him, that movement continues to go around the world today to the point that about 1/3 of the people on the earth profess to be Christians. God knows how many really are. That to the natural mind is unbelievable. But God has done that, and we are believers in his power. I believe that the greatest awakening in American history could be yet ahead. And I am a realist. You know, I'm reporting on what's wrong day and night. But I'm filled with hope. When I meet with God, I'm filled with hope. I'm burdened, I'm grieved, I'm pained, but I'm filled with hope because of who he is. And Ephesians 3 tells us he's able to do exceeding abundantly above all we can ask and think. Let me go to the calls, to our phones, and Christian in Salt. All right, Christian's gone. I wanted to bring Christian on because he's upset about everything in the world. He was upset about everything in the world. And it's very easy to be. So here's what we do. All right, you ready? We look to God and his word. All right. Then we look at the situation, the world around us, and we see how messed up and crazy it is, how lost people are, how much they need Jesus, how confused this world is, how carnal this world is, how selfish this world is, and on and on. And then what do? Now we look back to the Lord. So we come with a burden, we come with pain, we come with concern, but now we turn around and we go back to the Lord and we build our faith, and from there we go and bring the good news to others. You know, folks who are used in healing ministry will constantly share testimonies of what God's done. Many of them go back to their hotel rooms after ministering on the road, and they're grieved in pain because of those who weren't healed, because they're full of compassion. They care for the sick. But they constantly tell the stories of those who were healed to encourage and to strengthen faith and to build faith. We need to do our best to encourage others, to strengthen others, and to share what God is doing. Let our faith be built. And you know, the most amazing thing you could do is lead someone to Jesus, to see them get born again, to see new life come to them. It's amazing. It's extraordinary. It's incredible. And no matter how badly things are going in the world around us, when someone genuinely comes to Jesus, there's joy. All right, let me grab a call here. We go to Rob in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to the Line of Fire.
Hello, Dr. Brown. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I really appreciate your ministry. I recently found out about a ministry, a teaching ministry named Bema Discipleship. And the fellow who leads that, his name is Marty Solomon. And listening to, I'm still in Genesis. He's talking about Genesis, and I'm learning stuff. I've been a Christian since 1972, and I've never heard stuff like this. For example, the structure behind the Hebrew Scriptures, and how.
Give an example.
Well, he was talking about chiasms and how the creation story has, a structure of like A, B, C, D, then D, C, B, A. And so you look at the center point, and the center point talks about the Sabbath. And I never knew that before. I mean, I know the Sabbath is important. I know it's discussed in those first 7 days of creation, but I never knew about this poetic or, whatever kind of literary structure that the Hebrew uses. But anyway, I was in listening to that. He, at one point, one of his broadcasts, he mentions Rob Bell. He says he borrowed heavily from some Rob Bell teaching that he had heard.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering what your opinion, if you're familiar with him, and what your opinion
Yeah, sure.
is.
Yeah, I'm not
ministry.
familiar. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the particular ministry, but there are plenty I'm not familiar with. Rob Bell is completely heretical now. Rob Bell is completely outside the faith now. Did he say some things that may have been interesting in the past, or that you could have learned from the past? Yeah, here and there, but he's completely heretical now. So if this fellow's leaning on Rob Bell today, that would raise 1,000,001 flags for me. If he just found something years back that was useful, and as long as he qualifies it, that's a separate thing. Yeah, things like chiastic structure, that's well known to scholars. It's normally seen within verses in Hebrew, especially the poetry works like that. But then it's debated, and you may find in the New Testament, the Old Testament, just verses laid out where it starts with one theme, a first theme, a second, a third, then it goes backwards, the third, the second, the first. And sometimes the structures are really there, and sometimes people are reading in more. So whatever it is, it's good to dig, great to dig. So whatever it is, dig and see, okay, yeah, does that work? Because if it's clear in the Hebrew in terms of a structure over a chapter, it should be clear in the English as well. Hey, thank you for your question. Hey friends, I want to take a moment to thank you for standing with us and show you firsthand where your funds have gone, the renovations, the upgrades to our studio, and what we've been able to accomplish with your help. Hey, come around here. I want you to see something. I don't think we've ever shown this before. So this is how things operate. All this brand new, just in recent months, recent weeks. Right there, big screen, as I can see what's happening that we need to be seeing. Over here are different clocks for radio, for different segments in time. Over here, this is, if we're putting things on live stream, you're going to see what I'm seeing right here. Over here, this is where I'm in contact with the rest of the radio studios. Calls come in, I interact over there. And right over there, you can see where there's a second camera. That will be used when we have guests in studio so that we can get everyone on camera. Right now, we haven't been able to do that, but we're going to be able to do that. This is also going to enable us to have different angles as we do Skype videos and Skype debates. But let me show you some of the most exciting stuff. Hey, come this way. All right, I want you to meet Caleb. Caleb is our video, audio, computer tech expert. He's new here. He's only part-time. We need him here full-time. We are now able to do our daily live stream of our radio show. So you're watching it on video. You're hearing an audio clip on the radio. You're watching a video on YouTube. Something happens in the news, boom, they're on it. We've got high-tech equipment. Pull it up, put it on the screen. I can talk about it, read it to you as you're watching at home. It's amazing. And we now have new equipment that's going to enable me on the road to do high-quality live stream of my radio show in America, even in other countries. And oh, we got a big gap here. We need a major new computer. Not only will it enable us to get things out even more quickly, so if something happens in the news, you're frustrated out. What does Dr. Brown have to say? No problem. We got it covered within minutes. It's up, it's out. But we need this for post-production as well. We need one more person sitting here. If you can believe it, the 1,000+ videos that we have out, plus we record in there from the Ask Me Anything broadcast for God TV and the NRB TV Line of Fire broadcast, recorded right in there in our studio. We do all of that with me and 1.5 employees. We need to add Caleb full-time. We need one more person in here. We need that computer. With that, friends, the sky is the limit for what we can put out. We are your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Help us amplify your voice. Together we're making a difference. A generation is being impacted. So your one-time gift goes a long way, really, in helping us advance this Jesus revolutionary cause, and we'll be back with more updates as they happen.
Again is Dr. Michael Brown.
I've got some bad news followed by good news. I've got bad news, but I've got better news than the bad news. This is Michael Brown. Welcome to The Line of Fire. The number to call with your comments, questions is 866-34-TRUTH, 866-348-7884. Bad news. Man, Facebook, they are really hurting conservative media. I'm reading reports since the new algorithms, since they've decided to highlight certain news items that they feel are going to be helpful to others, news that people want to see, that conservative sites have been taking a real hit. One major conservative news site, its reach went down by 1.5 million. We've watched our reach just continue to drop dramatically. Now, look, we've got just under 560,000 Facebook followers, and we are super active there. And in comparison to many other Christian/conservative sites, we're doing well. We're doing very well in terms of who we reach. But our reach, in terms of once we post things, how many people they then multiply and touch, is a fraction, a tiny fraction, at times a tenth, at times 100th of what it was before. The Ask Dr. Brown page, if you haven't liked it, please do, because we post there day and night, so you'll be edified and strengthened day and night. ASKDR Brown on Facebook. All right, so we do live streams there all the time when I'm out preaching. We've got our radio show. You can watch it live there. It's live right now, even as I'm speaking. My latest articles get posted there. Our latest videos get posted immediately. Breaking news gets posted. It's a place you want to be, all right? But Facebook, whatever they're doing with their algorithms is such that they are squeezing things dry. More bad news. YouTube, as you know, at one point demonetized about 900 of our videos in one shot. Yeah, almost all the videos we had, we're now over 1,200. We had about 1,000 then. So what that said was that they are not suitable for advertisers. They didn't ban them. They just said when people click on them, you know, the first 5 seconds there's an ad, then you click to skip the ad. So, and you get a fraction of a penny every time that happens. But if something was viewed millions of times, that would bring in substantial money to help an organization. In our case, things may be viewed tens of thousands of times or hundreds of thousands of times. It brings in a little extra money that we then just put back into our outreach ministry. So it's helpful. So then a bunch of them got fixed, but then every single week there'll be a number that they don't block, they demonetize. And they say these are not suitable for all advertisers. Request review. So then we request a review, and most of the time, once they're reviewed, they're approved. So most recently, to my surprise, a show where we bring attention to shocking legislation in California, what I call the "You Must Stay Gay" bill, that absolutely shocking legislation that California is trying to push, mind-boggling, and a direct assault on freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of self-determination. Absolutely shocking bill that got flagged, but then after review got approved. Well, just got a notice this morning that my 3-minute video responding to Geraldo Rivera saying that that Gaza Strip is a concentration camp, Geraldo claiming that it's a concentration camp and blasting Israelis. I say I don't approve of everything Israel does, and I hate that the Palestinians are suffering. My video is called "What Geraldo Got Wrong About Gaza." It's only got 1,399 views so far, but here's what happened. They sent me the note today. It is not suitable for most advertisers, confirmed by manual review. Confirmed by manual review. Yeah. What's not suitable about it? I speak about the wrong of Hamas. I say it's not a concentration camp. Israelis are not working the Gazan Palestinians to death and then carting them off to gas chambers and crematoria. It's not a concentration camp. And the main reason the nation there, or Gaza Strip, is in such a mess is because of Hamas leadership. Israel gave them complete independence. Instead, they vote terrorists into power. that are trying to kill them. No, not suitable. Now, we're not putting this up for money. We're putting this up to get a message out. But this is what we're dealing with day and night and day and night and day and night. This type of resistance, along with many others. Good news is we have weapons that YouTube and Facebook can't stop. We have weapons that all of the social media giants and Google and whoever and the left-wing media can't stop. We have more powerful weapons. Yeah, we'll continue to push back here. We'll continue to call people to account here. We absolutely will. No question about it. But my primary means of fulfilling the commission from the Lord is not through social media, not through internet, not through secular media, although we use all these things and rely on them on a certain level to get a message out. We have the power of prayer, and we have the power of evangelism. We have the power of the gospel. We have the power of the Spirit. What can possibly stand against that? Let me read something to you that Reinhard Bonnke said when God called him to base his ministry in America in the early 2000s. And then God began to speak to him about America having a great wave of revival. Listen to what Reinhard Bonnke said. I want you to believe that God has indeed spoken, saying, America will be saved. And when he speaks of that, he speaks of revival, a mighty awakening, a tidal wave of salvation sweeping across the United States from stadium to stadium, city to city, coast to coast. He said, I want you to believe that God has indeed spoken, saying, America will be saved. When your faith rises with mine, we will see a mighty wave of revival sweep across this land, similar to the one I have already witnessed in Africa. Now, here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. Are you ready? When you believe God has spoken something to you, you're reading the scripture and the verses jump off the page and you think, yes, yes, I know God has spoken. That word has become personal to me, for my family, for this loved one I'm praying for the ministry situation we're in the midst of. You ever had that? Just a promise God gave to Israel or a word he spoke to someone else in scripture and it jumps off the pages at you. It jumps off the pages and you're struck by it. It's as if God himself came in the room and told you that's for you. Fear not, for I'm with you, even though it was spoken to Israel at a certain point in time. That's as if God is speaking it directly to you, or something Paul wrote to the Corinthians, and boom, it jumps at you, and you know that God's giving you that promise. Or maybe by his Spirit, he's spoken something to you. He's given you an assurance of something that he's going to do before it happens, and you know that's going to happen. There's only one problem. Generally speaking, it doesn't happen immediately. Generally speaking, there is a trial of faith that follows. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was talking about while ministering, he felt the Spirit spoke something to him, laid something on his heart, and he immediately shared it with the congregation. And no sooner did he say the words, all sense of assurance disappeared. You ever had that happen to you? You're praying with someone and you say, I really believe the Lord's going to come through for you here. Or I really believe this person we're praying for is going to be healed. And you feel to speak it out. You feel so sure. The moment you speak, it's like, am I really sure? Did God really speak that to me? Did he give me that promise? Listen to how Bonnke describes this. So you get the word, but now the trial of faith. Listen to what Bonnke said. In every case, as I take action, there follows a trial of faith. It is a time in which the words I have heard remain inaudible to the world. To others, I have followed a fool's quest. Let me read that again. In every case, as I take action, there follows a trial of faith. It is a time in which the words I have heard remain inaudible to the world. To others, it appears I have followed a fool's quest. How many of you can relate to that? That you've had that same experience? How many of you can relate to going through that? I'm raised both hands. Yeah. that you're in prayer, you're sure something's going to happen, and you feel you've got to share that. You tell your spouse, you tell your family, you tell your ministry colleagues, you tell your friend, whatever it is. I know this is going to happen. I know it seems crazy, but I know it. And then you wake up the next day and you think, was I crazy? Was I absolutely out of my head? One of my friends, Jewish believer, is ministering years back in Russia, and he feels led to bring with him a copy of the American Constitution, and that he is supposed to give it to Boris Yeltsin, who no more knows him than he knows the man on the moon. And Boris Yeltsin was then the leader of Russia. He felt he was supposed to give this personally to Yeltsin for the rewriting of the Russian Constitution, that they would have input from America, and he had to translate it into Russian. And he had it with him. And he was at a meeting. It's a personal friend of mine. He was at a meeting training Messianic Jewish leaders in Russia. And he makes the announcement, he just feels to share this, he makes the announcement that he is going to hand this to Boris Yeltsin on that trip. And no sooner does he say it, he thinks to himself, are you crazy? Are you completely out of your mind? You're going to be embarrassed before all these people. You just made a mockery of your ministry. I mean, he felt to share it. He was confident. But no sooner does he say it, reality hits like, oh, yeah, right. Sure. Yeah, and probably go horseback riding with him while you're there, too. Maybe even go to the moon on a rocket ship. It's like it seemed that crazy. Well, he normally stayed at one nice hotel before he left to get refreshed before traveling back to the States. And his personal assistant contacted him and said, hey, can't stay there. They're doing some construction work or it's sold out, whatever. But there's a new hotel just opened up. I've got you booked there. So my friend is over there, and he's in the workout room. He's just getting a little time to rest. And an announcement goes through the hotel that people need to get out of the public areas because Boris Yeltsin is coming into the building. What happened was this hotel, unbeknownst to my friend and his personal assistant, this hotel was a joint venture between the West and Russia, and Yeltsin was coming for kind of the inauguration. So my friend rushes to his room, gets his best suit on, and just walks down to where this meeting's happening. And suddenly Yeltsin comes walking through and stops. And my friend just comes up to him, says through the interpreter, I've got this for you. It's the American Constitution translated into Russian, and I want to give it to you because I understand you're working on rewriting the Russian Constitution. Yeltsin takes it and leaves the hotel. It happened. But until that time, man, you go through questions and doubts.
Rafa, to restore, to heal, to repair, to make wholesome.
I wrote my entire doctoral dissertation on the Hebrew word for healing, and the root is Rapha. And what I discovered reading the Hebrew Bible and then comparing the Hebrew to the other Semitic languages is that the root fundamentally means to make whole. It's about restoration and wholesomeness that can include physical healing, but is not limited to it. That's why the same verb can be used, say, for healing a sick body, Hezekiah, 2 Kings chapter 20. It can be used for repairing a broken down altar, 1 Kings chapter 18 with Elijah. It can be used for making wholesome undrinkable waters, say 2 Kings chapter 2 with Elisha. It can be used for repairing the earth's fissures after an earthquake, say Psalm 60. And check this out, in Leviticus 13 and 14, you have the laws of cleanliness and things and restoration having to do with a severe skin disease, which is often translated leprosy, not accurately, but a severe skin disease in the body, and then a severe disease in the house. All right, so mildew in the house and a severe skin disease in the body. And when they go away, when they stop spreading, when they are remitted, the same Hebrew word is used. For mildew, yeah, Rapha is used once again. So when we look at the larger usage, we understand that when God told Israel in Exodus 15:26, I am the Lord your healer. Ani Adonai Rofecha. It didn't just mean physical diseases. In fact, when he says all the diseases I put on Egypt, I won't put on you. What were those diseases? Just physical afflictions? No. Also the Nile turning into blood, frogs in the river and all that. So when God says, I'm your healer, what does he mean? The whole person wholly healed, inside, outside. That's our God's heart. He's the one who makes us whole.
866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Everybody who is watching, look in my eyes carefully. Everybody who is listening, give me your best ear. I believe God is going to pour out his Spirit on our nation in ways beyond what we've seen so far. I believe it. I can't prove it. I can't guarantee it. I believe it. I believe that God is calling us to get our house in order so that we will walk worthy of his Spirit. I believe he is revealing sin and corruption and skepticism and gullibility so that we will walk worthy of what he's going to do, so that when the harvest comes, we will be ready for it. We were not ready for the great harvest of the Jesus People movement. I believe if God started to radically save hundreds of thousands of gays, lesbians, bisexual, transgender identified people, that the church by and large would not be ready for that today. I believe if we had a tremendous outpouring of the Spirit with miracles, manifestation of the gifts of the Spirit, that the church would not be ready for that today. So he must shake us and bring us to repentance and soften our hearts and give us a greater baptism of love and help us to get more grounded in the Word and the Spirit and godly character and have a heart for the lost. But I believe he is at work, and I believe we could see amazing things happen in the days ahead. I want to encourage your hearts. You know, I'm a sober realist. You know, I'm constantly sounding the alarm. Look, if you've read my book, Playing with Holy Fire, we're getting great reports from readers. I'm so gratified. The book came out 6 days ago, and we are thrilled with the reports that we are getting from readers of the book. Deep, deep appreciation. In fact, if you haven't posted your review on Amazon yet, even if you love the book and share it with others, do that too. It's just a great way to get word out to others. Go to Amazon.com and post your review, letting folks know about the book and how it's impacted you. But we shoot straight. I mean, to the point and clear, and very heavy stuff we talk about. But I believe that this will help us, and I'm not the only one bringing these words, but as we receive correction and deepen our roots, that we'll be ready for the things that God is about to do. Friends, we must give ourselves back to the Great Commission. We must give ourselves to prayer for revival, to prayer for our nation, and we must ask God, break our heart for a lost world. Help us to actually believe people are lost, that there's a coming judgment. May God give us a fresh burden. May he break through all the distractions and the shallowness of our age and give us a genuine burden. Yes, it's painful. It's just like a woman giving birth, but it produces new life. As Reinhard Bonnke was looking at America, thinking, well, America's heard the gospel over and over. Why do we have to keep preaching? This is what he felt God shared with him. Let me share this quote with you. Bonnke said, God said to me, every generation needs regeneration. To me, this means the gospel must be preached again and again. The previous crusades, revivals, and awakenings in the United States are not enough. The gospel must be received again in every generation. America is clearly a land in need of the preached gospel. And let me share one last quote with you from Reinhard Bonnke. And I share these with you to build your faith, to challenge you, to encourage you, and to say, may God raise up an army of evangelists. By the way, if you want to be trained and equipped for evangelistic ministry, for missions, come to Fire School. We have revamped our entire program so that you spend 9 intensive months with us in the Word, in prayer, in practical ministry, in the fire. 9 intensive, life-changing, glorious months with us, and then go out after that into a 9-month internship where you will get your hands wet and your feet dirty on the field and serving in different ways. Fire School of Ministry, our new 9-month leadership institute, and then you get right out on the field and continue with online classes in your second year. Go to fire-school.org to find out more. Fire-school.org. Let me share one more faith-building quote with you from Bakke, who is an evangelist through and through. He said this: much of the American population acts as if they have not heard the good news. That is because the gospel must be presented clearly. Many churches have become so seeker-friendly that the gospel has become disguised as just another self-help manual. But the gospel wears no mask. It is the power of God to save the lost, to deliver from guilt and the crippling power of sin. The Holy Spirit has clothed himself with the gospel. Oh, friends, if we would only give ourselves back to the proclamation of the gospel from our pulpits, in our small groups, in our places of business, from door to door, in our schools, wherever God opens the door. Every day, say, God, use me for the Great Commission. You say, you don't understand. I can't leave my house. I'm home. We've got one car. My husband's out. I'm home with 3 little kids. God can use you for the Great Commission, for sure. Not just pouring into your kids and giving them a heart for the lost, but in prayer. He can use you in prayer. That's massive. Everything has to be supported by prayer. It can be prayer that's prayed while changing diapers. God save my neighbors. God's near to the brokenhearted. God pays attention to those things. Most people are going to get saved through a one-on-one witness. Let us ask God for opportunities. Lord, open doors. Give me opportunities. Show me someone to share with. Let a conversation be just whatever. And then you'd be amazed how once you get in the habit of doing it, it becomes a lifestyle. May God shake us and awaken us here in America. All right. I'm going to change topics in these last couple of minutes. I'm going to answer a question posted on YouTube as well. We've got some very important interviews you don't want to miss tomorrow on the Line of Fire broadcast. Okay. Syria. So reported chemical weapons attack and then a bombing strike on Syria. Who's responsible for it? There's denial, and Russia says the chemical attack is fake news and it's an outrage, and did America then attack subsequently? And, well, there are strong reports that said Israel carried out the attack because Israel's not going to allow Syria, working with Iran, to have chemical weapons that could easily be used against Israel and others as well. There's a report sent to me by a Christian Zionist on Facebook. Has Moscow turned against Jerusalem? In a limited sense, yes. Israel did not consult with Russia prior to its strike on the T4 airbase in Syria, where Iranian-designed drones were being built. So Israel's saying, you're going to do this kind of thing, and they're chemical weapons. We're going to take out your Iranian-backed weapons and drones and things like that. Israel also did not consult with Russia when it retaliated for the Iranian drone that invaded Israeli airspace on the 10th of February. In between these two stories, Netanyahu has emphatically and repeatedly told Putin, and the world for that matter, that Israel will do whatever it has to do to protect itself, specifically in the short term, from Iranian weapons intended for Hezbollah in Lebanon to wage war against the Jewish state. Still, Moscow is incensed. It has summoned Israel's resident ambassador to the Kremlin. Most of Russia's outrage is a bleed over from its reaction to charges it is responsible for the chemical weapons attack in Syria over the past weekend. Israel probably took advantage of the brouhaha to execute destruction of the T4 airbase, but that is the only connection to it. Israel was not reacting to Assad's horrific chlorine attack. Trump and UN Ambassador Haley are openly charging Russia for culpability in that attack. For its part, Russia says it has found absolutely no evidence of any chemical weapons use. Accordingly, Washington has pledged to respond to Moscow, and Moscow has pledged to respond, and Moscow has pledged to defend itself. The other problem for Jerusalem is that both the U.S. and Russia are its allies. Again, just another reminder to pray for the volatile situation in the Middle East and for the great suffering of the people there and the countries surrounding Israel, the pressure Israel's under, the pressure the Palestinians are under. Pray, Lord, your kingdom come to Israel in the Middle East. Lord, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And Lord, may there be a great wave of salvation and men and women, Jews and Gentiles, turning to you. A question posted on YouTube, just to totally change gears here, kind of like the the cool down after a workout. Hit a great workout this morning, feeling great after doing it. But at the end, I didn't have a chance to cool down. We finished the interview literally 1 minute later. I had to do finish the workout literally 1 minute later. Had to do a phone interview, but all went well. So, changing gears though, questions posted on YouTube about the identity of Melchizedek. There is a Jewish tradition found in the Jerusalem Talmud that says that Melchizedek, was actually Shem, one of the three sons of Noah. There is zero evidence for that. In fact, you can outright reject that. Throw that out, forget about it. It's just a myth, all right? And you have church myths, you have synagogue myths, a myth, throw it out. Was Melchizedek a historical figure, a man whose genealogy and beginning and end are not recorded in Scripture, hence a type of the Son of God who's without father, mother in terms of his eternal begetting, and who's without beginning and end, Hebrews 7. Or is Melchizedek actually the Son of God appearing in the Hebrew Scriptures? Is he actually appearing in the Hebrew Scriptures? Is it a theophany or a Christophany, where the Son of God appears in human form, like in Genesis 18 or Genesis 32, for example? You can argue either one. You can say Hebrews is saying that as a theophany or a Christophany, or you could say that he is just a symbolic type of the Son of God. That's how I read it, as a symbolic type, personally, just to let you know that. That's how I understand it. I read it as a symbolic type, and that's what Hebrews 7 is saying. And Psalm 110 says he'll be a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. However, it is debatable. Hey, friends, remember to stand with us. Your support enables us to be broadcasting on the air and online. So go to AskDrBrown.org, click on Donate. Join us today. Together, we're making a difference.